Okay, so the previous video, which was called Aussie Slang Politics and had the warning it's rude, okay, is the start of a bigger conversation, okay? Okay, so some people are proud of Australian in that it's a funny language, okay? If you, Australian is full of wordplay. Bad puns and wordplay are plenty. Chockers full of it, okay? And sometimes that wordplay comes with really bad swearing, okay? Like, if this is considered acceptable in Australian comedy about politics, okay? If you look at the juice media, the way they talk, okay, would be considered unacceptable in other English speaking countries. To use that language would be like so fluently, would probably be jarring. Okay, specifically shit stain, shit fuckery, and shit cunt. Oh, they don't say shit cunt, do they? No. Juice media doesn't say shit cunt. Shit cunt is a popular in amongst you might call them the drinking classes or the anyway the shit stain and shit fuckery, and using the word shit a lot is very much what they call strine. Okay, a lot of common regular speech in strine is not swearing. It's a functional language. Um, However, um, it is perfectly acceptable um, in some social circles more than others to express usually disaffection for something with language that's rude. So um, perhaps in America they'd call it cussing, which is a different way of pronouncing the word cursing or curse words. Um, Another language would call it swearing. But swearing implies making an oath or affirmation. So, is words like shit fuckery and shit cunt and dog cunt and and um poofter, and like, and lots of there's a lot of um or do you really want to use the word foul language while we're on the subject of sound like rather than is written like? Foul language sounds like a bird. So now we're blaming the birds for it, which means we're blaming the shields, which means we're blaming the women. Okay? So if you go through those jumps of like the mimetic jumps, it's not necessarily a contextually logical conclusion to make those jumps, but medically they are connected. So a bird is a Sheila, which is a woman. A ewe is a female sheep, which means you're a bird. Okay? You're a bird, which means you're a Sheila. Okay? So the birds are Sheilas. Okay? The birds are Sheilas, and Sheilas are female sheep. And we ride on the back of a sheep. Australia was made by riding on the back of a sheep, which means Australia was made by raping the birds. Australia was made, or but it shouldn't be this point whether it was right. Australia was made by fucking Sheilas or fucking birds. Okay, so if Australia was made by fucking birds, then it was made by fucking women. Okay, are you getting this? So Australia was created by fucking women. Was the last video, okay? And you are a Sheila because you are a female sheep, which means you are a Sheila, which means you're a bird. Okay, you bloody poofter. You're a bloody poofter. You are. You're a bloody poofter because you're a bloody bird and you're a bloody Sheila. And just like a fucking sheep, you take it right up the fucking backside. You know what you are? You are Narelle. And whether it's your own ass or my ass or the age of a queer ass, and we're doing astrology, we can say right now that you are a female sheep and you take it up the arse, bird, Sheila, you doggy cunt, you doggy dog slut cunt. Okay? Okay? So, what does it mean for juice media to have these nawshaw accented women using bogan level strine language, shit fuckery and shit stains and stuff like shit stain sounds more American. Shit fuckery a bit likewise, but the sort of way that the word shit is that's sort of like the style of talking, you know, with the North Shore accent is quite strange. It becomes because in terms of social etiquette, okay, in terms of social etiquette, an American isn't allowed to do that, and neither is a Pom. Okay, but an Australian is. Okay, in strine, that's acceptable in some social circles, and particularly in political comedy, that's considered acceptable to talk like that, the way juice media does, but not necessarily in American or English politics, have you noticed? Okay, so the social etiquette, the permissibility of that behaviour is 100% Australian, but the actual slang might not be. Okay, the origin of shit stain might be American. Shit fuckery sounds like something that group might have actually made up. It might not have been spoken before they said that. They could have invented that one. It could have been just something they thought. Well, that sounds Aussie, because it sounds rude. That's why. Okay. So this sort of this idea of strine or bogan being a language that's still on the convict ship with everyone in irons, looking for a moment's opportunity to exercise their Irish rebel instincts, or shall we say aspirations more than instincts, to grab the nearest hard object and whack the gubbers over the head with it, and while calling him a shit cunt, or you know, and a shit stain for his shit fuckery. Um, Seems like that's the North Shore's perception of where strine/bogan culture has gone. Nowhere over the last 250 years. It's the same thing. And to distinguish Australia from the Poms and the Yanks means to be allowed to swear like a salty sailor who's also an ex-con. And so Juice Media have done a social faux pas. They've actually jabbed Australian culture right in the guts, right there, right in the side, jabbed in the culture and said, North Shore swears too. North Shore is not better than you. North Shore is bogan also. And that kind of, with that style of accent, North Shore is bogan. North Shore is strine. North Shore is bogan. North Shore is strine. The Australian government is bogan. It's strine. Okay, the North Shore is bogan. The North Shore is strine. And poked them in the side and said, "You're not Poms and you're not Yanks. Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Maybe you are, because you're only mimicking bogan and fucking strine. Next thing you know, you're saying fucking cobber. Like, no one says cobber. Time a kangaroo down sport, time a kangaroo down cobber. They don't actually say that. Okay? You know? So, if they did back in the 1940s, we don't know, but they don't do it now. And so, are they making fun of the North Shore, or are they actually North Shore people who are making fun of Bogans by pretending Bogans are Yanks? Okay, what's Juice Media doing there? Because they seem to be making fun of the Australian government. Are they saying the Australian government doesn't know if they're from the North Shore, if they're Bogan, if they're Strine, if they're Poms, or if they're Yanks? Who's sorry, they're on the fucking money, because that is a theme in Australian society, is that confusion, and it sort of comes at the expense of acknowledging that there's a lot of regional variation, including within the North Shore, and there's a lot of variation between Strine speakers and Bogan people, what they call the Bogans, which, by the way, is a Melbourne word, not a Sydney word. So to use North Shore and Bogan in the same sentence is to mix up two regional dialects right there. If you're talking about Sydney, you'd say Westie, and you wouldn't say North Shore if you're talking about Bogans in Melbourne. You'd say Frankston versus St Kilda, or more specifically, Frankston versus the Yarra. Okay, so it's a regional variation thing, and so to pick on the North Shore was really rude of Western Sydney, wasn't of the Westies, wasn't it? North Shore, okay, right? It was bloody rude. On the other hand, okay, Blackstown was founded as a place to dump the black people when they took over what's now called Eastern Sydney with their Redcoats army and fucked people over. And Blackstown was where the convicts were running when they didn't want to be part of that shit no more. That was a hideout for runaways and blackfellas. And these days it's a hideout for migrants as well. And it become a place where people who migrated from the bush went as well, and so on and so forth. So it's a place where people go when they're running away from somewhere else. And so the Bogan Strine language thread, which isn't really Bogan in that case it's Westie, the Westie dialect of Bogan Strine English, okay, would say North Shore, because the Gubba, when the Rocks and Sans Souci and Lapa and that got all, had too many prisons and farms built on, he decided to, when they started to screw over Bennelong's country, okay, which is really strange that they did that, because they say Gadigal Wangal country is like Newtown, but they sort of drew the picture when they were, like, Mr. M History, when he drew the picture, he was saying that Bennelong was from across the Parramatta River, which means he's in the North Shore. And I was like, well, hang on a second. That's not Gadigal Wangal country. Isn't Gadigal Wangal country Newtown? Like, are their signs wrong, or is Mr. M History wrong, or was that read wrong, that video read wrong? Either way, North Shore was where the Gubbers went. And so this stereotype of the North Shore being about the Gubbers is something that the North Shore has been trying to shake off. The North Shore has been trying to shake it off because, in truth, a lot of people that went there were squatters. They're squatters who were beach bums, and they just, the squatters who just built their house there. They didn't ask the local mob permission. They didn't ask the government permission. They just squatted there. And so a lot of those older houses that are there are from squatters. And so actually the reputation of the North Shore being upper class toffee English stuff isn't necessarily accurate, except that some of the squatters that went there were probably English, more likely to be English, and the Irish were more likely to go west. I mean, the Rum Rebellion happened in Rouse Hill, which is about 15, 20 kilometres from Blackstown. being the word they used at the time, not the word they use now. It's actually 2148 Black Town now. That's the postcode. Look it up, okay? Blacks that area is not Eora or Gadigal Wangle country either. It's Durrug. Um, so um, so to sort of shame the North Shore is something that Australian politics is trying to shake off. And the North Shore is trying to say they're not English and they're not American, they're strong. And Juice Media is an example of that. Um, the problem is a lot of Australian comedy is parochial, jingoistic, and stereotypical. Um, and international observers have looked at some Aussie comedy and gone, how the heck can you get away with telling jokes like that? Um, like, Super Wog, for example. The actual word wog is like ginger for Mediterranean people in Australia. Okay. It's actually a racial word. It's racist. And it's a word that people of Mediterranean extraction took on board. In a similar way that some rap musicians in the USA abusing a particular word that used to be levelled at their ancestors in a way that was, rude to them. Okay, we're pretty sure we're wogs. Sorry, were wogs put on they weren't lynched or nothing, were they, in Australia? Don't think so. But they well, they got bashed at school sometimes, and they got called some foul names though. They got roughed up a little bit. It wasn't particularly nice. And there was a White Australia policy once, although technically that started to end when the wogs showed up. So, it's crazy. So, the need for Australia and the United States of America to shake off England is still ongoing. You probably find that India and South Africa, Pakistan, and other colonial countries are trying to shake off the English aristocracy. And it's very shocking, okay, because one of the cultural spins that's been experienced, particularly over the last 50 to 80 years, has been the leader of the charge in moving the British Empire as colonial countries away from the English aristocracy was to Americanise those communities culturally, because America favoured itself as a world leader in opposing the aristocracy. And what we're seeing now is the lie of how America was founded playing out in a really strange way. And we're also seeing lies of how Australia was founded. Like, for example, here the French and the English were at war, and America was founded by those colonies being at war with England in the years just before the Sydney Penal Colony started at Lapa and Botany, which is part of Sydney, by the way. Then why were French and American ships there? Okay. Does that have something to do with the American founding fathers being capitalists who didn't want to pay taxes to the parent corporation? And there were competing aristocrats or petit bourgeois who were looking to go into some kind of corporate competition. If that's the case, then we're in a very interesting state of affairs, because that makes Australia pitted against one corporation versus another, or Australia's pitted against both the aristocracy and the petty aristocracy. That makes the North Shore people in Australia roughly the akin of Bogans and Strine people by another name. So they're almost like a sub, like, the Bogans and the Westies are from the same class then. They're from the same class, and that class is the working class, and the petit bourgeois are the Americans, and the bourgeois are the English aristocracy, right? And that means the underclass are all the people who were mistreated by the Australian White Australia policy and other forms of discrimination. And I look at that historically and go, oh, hang on a second. There's actually a lot of truth to that. Okay, but look at the present tense context. Are those groups discriminated against, or are they celebrated? And is there now a continuation of the same discrimination against Bogan and Strine people and their North Shore equivalents that there was 250 years ago? Are they still treated like convicts? Are they still assumed to be criminals? Are they assumed to be criminals? Are you are they assumed to be criminals? Okay, we need to do two things in Australia. We need to fully acknowledge that the founding of the colony at Lapa and Botany Bay and the founding of what's now called Sydney was done in a criminal fashion, okay? There's absolutely no shred of a doubt, okay? There's no doubt at all that was an imperial invasion. It was military-based, that what the Aboriginal peoples of the many different tribes, including the Sydney tribes, okay, experienced was nothing short of invasion, war, and since Lachlan Macquarie, during that era, deliberate attempt at genocide. It was scuffles, it was fights, it was battles, it was imperialism, and it was war before Lachlan Macquarie, but it was a declaration of attempted genocide after Lachlan Macquarie. So we cannot assume that the founding of Sydney as a penal colony was not a crime. Okay? We cannot assume that what happened in Australia to mob was not a crime, because it fucking was a crime. It was also a crime to lock up the Japanese and the Germans during World War II, okay? Just like they did to George Takei in the USA, they did that in Australia as well, okay? There's things here that we have to acknowledge were in fact crimes, okay? However, we also need to acknowledge that the convicts did not come here voluntarily. They didn't come here voluntarily. They were in chains. They were ripped off by the English aristocracy. The founding of the United States of America was a lie by a subsidiary of the English and French former aristocracies. Remember, the Jacobites did not allow the completion of the French Revolution. They were a vanguard who usurped it, and Robespierre got his head chopped off for a reason. So the French and American influence in that respect is an attempt to prevent proper revolution against the European and English aristocracy. Okay? And ideologically, to this day, the Bogan and Strine peoples are in mental chains through language they've co-created, language that's been put on them, word games that's been put on them, and parochial, ham-fisted, race-baiting games by Pauline Hanson, by Clive Palmer, by various and sundry politicians of all stripes throughout Australian history, okay? That has deflected from the central issue of that parliament being set up to get royalties for the British Commonwealth and the English Crown, which does not have jurisdiction at all. That means none of those corporations have jurisdiction in Australia. That means none of those mining magnates have jurisdiction in Australia. That means America doesn't have jurisdiction in Australia. That means England doesn't have jurisdiction in Australia, okay? And because the Bogan and Australian people and people who were born in Australia, even if you are not Aboriginal, you do not have that affiliation with those overseas countries. You might identify and say, oh, well, you do have so-and-so ancestry in your grandparents or your great-grandparents, and that's fine. There are people, however, whose ancestry goes back to the convict days. And those people's ancestors came to Australia in chains and were forced to work as slaves for 7 years, okay, which is better than 400. But then again, they were enslaved for 1,000 years before that. Their ancestors were. And then afterwards, were only allowed to, were sent to do different places at His Majesty's pleasure through the governor. And the governor often worked up with the steam of his own fucking arrogance. Okay? And so that culture that builds up in Blackstown or Blacktown and other places like that later on afterwards is centered around this sneaky breaking your tools type mentality. When the gubber isn't looking, break your fucking tools type of thing. And the way the tools are broken is with language. Okay? The problem is that the language got commandeered by racism, the language got commandeered by sexism, and as a consequence, the true warfare that was required, which is class warfare, removed the solidarity between the poor people and the fucking rich, or the people and the corporations. Okay? The actual people, having been objectified each other, and then turned around and didn't properly fight off the fucking gubbers. Okay? And this needs to fucking stop. Okay? Look, Aboriginal people and Aboriginal people and working class Bogan Strine people and bush people and North Shore people, unless they're corporate people, okay, are the same fucking social class. They're the same fucking social class, and it's them against England, and it's them against Washington DC, and it's them against the corporations. Okay? Them, us, whatever. Okay? And, you know, just like Juice Media says, they're all shit stains and it's all shit fuckery. Do you want a choice between shit and shit light? Do you want a choice between shit and shit light? How those independents going to go and fight for your rights in each and every electorate if the electoral boundaries aren't correct? If they are, you know, beholden to a system that's structured in a particular way, if they have to pour through 250 years of statutes and start ripping them up because each one's got a code in it that in some cases is sneaky and beneficial to get Australia away from that corporate aristocratic superstructure, and in some cases is not, and actually drags Australia into it. Like, you know, which one is it? You know, like, you know, do you, like when people go fresh off the plane, go back in the 60s, it's fresh off the boat, okay, you're fresh off the plane, maybe Australia's where some of those Chinese people went. There was videos saying that some people worried China's lost 2/3 of its population since COVID. It's like, yeah, that was not the death rate, okay? As according to other statistics. Did Chinese people migrate en masse? And if so, how many of you are in Australia? We don't blame the Chinese civilians for COVID. If we've got any sense, they got affected too, okay? It's an illness that passed through the population. These things happen. You alright? Okay, okay, do you Chinese people who are recently in Australia, do you understand any of these cultural concepts? No, not really? Okay, okay, one's fresh off the plane, you know, like, you know, during COVID. Okay, you don't, you're still learning English language. Okay, it's not really saying, you're going to find like a lot of migrants in Australia that, that there's more than one English language spoken in Australia, and none of it sounds like the Queen or the King of England. Okay? And you're going to get confused, are you? Because the grammar and the syntax don't work properly. It's not the same. Okay? Okay, yeah. Okay, and there's a shit ton of fucking swearing too, isn't there? You know, it depends on which group you're talking to, doesn't it? Okay, it's a piss poor representation of the greater community to say copper and Tommy Kangaroo and down sport. Just the same, it's a piss poor representation of the community to say everyone says shit fuckery and shit stain all the time, because it's not fucking true, mate. Okay, so what's the actual truth of Australia? What's the actual truth of Australia? Okay. We talk about how communism is supposed to be the end state of fucking capitalism. What's the end state of communism? Well, it's anarchism. So we're all in a bit of, we're all going back to 30,000 BC. Okay? You're not going to have your emperor here. Okay? We're kicking out the English fucking emperor. We're not going to have the Chinese emperor. We don't care if we call him Chairman Mao or President Xi. You came in because you didn't like those assholes, did you? Okay, your people got put down for fucking 4,000 years or so, didn't they? With their freaking filial piety mandate of heaven crap. Hey? Just another society that went through that. Same with the fucking Indians. Okay, with their fucking caste system, law of Manu shit. Okay, you wanna go against that, do you? You're sick of being treated like, you're subservient to some arsehole you've never met? Welcome to Australia. This is where all the people who got screwed over by dictators go to. And while you think our numbers are few, and our economy is entirely reliant on corporations from overseas and being ripped off by mining companies or whatever, okay, what's really true about Australia is absolute hatred of dictatorships. Absolute fucking hatred for dictatorships. Complete despising of it. Now, that's something you can say is true about Australia, isn't it? Absolute hatred for dictatorship and enormous amounts of hypocrisy and irony as you watch the manipulative, controlling tendencies for one-upmanship and pissing contests and use a sheep, bitch, type of mentality as Australians, men in particular, not all of them, express their egalitarianism and their fair go with toxic misogyny entirely rooted in imperial dogma. And, the destroying language and the bogan language needs to improve. The rich backgrounds of anti-imperialism and, despising all that is stuck up, okay, is a valuable thing. But a sort of put down, bring you down, tall poppy syndrome, use a fucking sheep named Narelle and he's gonna fuck ya type of mentality is not egalitarian. It's not fair go. It's not an improvement. It's a version of shit or shit light. It's not independent of the Poms or the Yanks. That is not an independent candidate doing that, is that, to use this juice media's analogy? Is it? No. That's someone who's still tied to shit or shit light. So, the men of Australia need to apologise to the women of Australia and the men of Australia. Narelle's not a poofter. Narelle's not a poofter, and a poofter's not a priest. Up yours.